Okay, so we're here today. We're going to talk about body electronics and maybe some other things Jeff has to add. So Jeffory Schofield, will you give us an introduction of yourself and tell us, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, hi, everyone listening. I, like yourself, have been just kind of waiting and to see what's going to happen, but my heart's light is encouraging me quite strongly to come out of the silence, I would call it. But anyway, my background, just to give you an idea of how I came into body electronics. I'm a chiropractor, and I was practicing for 6 years in Tempe, Mesa, Scottsdale, Arizona. And I did that for 6 years and went through a divorce, and then went on to heal myself rather than everybody else. I was introduced to body electronics when I was still a chiropractic student. And the reason I implemented that was because of my daughter, Jennifer. And she was born while my wife and I were in chiropractic college at Palmer. And so we started holding points on Jennifer, and we saw benefits. And then after we got into practice out in Arizona, we saw that John Ray was teaching body electronic seminars in Maui. And with my perfectionist attitude, I had a hard time wrapping my head around being the perfect little Mormon boy that did everything right, and then to have a daughter with cerebral palsy. I just couldn't comprehend that kind of experience for this, for me, yeah. So I took Jennifer to Maui, and Doug was there, Doug Morrison, as well as John Ray, and a room full of people there at the YMCA on the coast of Maui, a beautiful setting. And that was
on a highway.
That was my first exposure to body electronics. I won't go into, all of the unfolding of the path that followed that, but I remember John Ray used to teach that if you start down this path, it may well be that the people you're with at the point you start do not choose to apply these principles, and you will wind up parting company, which is what I've experienced over and over again as part of my journey. So after like 13, 14 years now, since I was with Illia at the instructor's visualization and consciousness seminar that Doug was teaching. What was the year, Illia, that he taught that?
2005
or something?
2005.
2005. Okay, so Illia and I have communicated a little bit since that time, but just within the last month we've reconnected. And so this is our first working together to try and promote a better understanding of the far-reaching effects of consciousness change as applied to the ability we all have to access what John Ray termed the time-space continuum. So I think Illia and I are going to talk about what we experienced together, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. So let's go back to 2005. And that was a 4-week course. And that visualization and consciousness course, well, first of all, I'll tell for the listeners to have an understanding who attends the course. And that has actually been the last visualization and consciousness course on the planet to date. Not that there can't be another one in the future, but first there has to be like the prerequisite to be considered for that course is that you're a body electronics instructor. So to be a body electronics, to be trained as a body electronics instructor, you would have gone through the point holding flow sheet, which I was just writing about it in the last few days. The main points are about 23, a minimum of 23 points. So that would be 23 point holding sessions to get partially through the flow sheet, at least get to the main points where you're going through the endocrine points, the spinal points, and the organ points. And it's very sequential. This flow sheet is very sequential. It opens up the holistic body in a very sequential way, starting with the physical body. So by sequential, I mean it starts with physical, then it goes to emotional, mental, and spiritual, in that order. So from there, in the instructor's course, then you have the cranial electronics, and that is doing a cranial work that is very advanced. And by the time one does cranial work, we have come to the place of really being able to process internally, process our pain, process our anything that comes up, any of the word patterns, emotions, and memory that comes up. We're very you get quite adept at it prior to doing the cranial electronics. So that just gives you an idea of who was present at the VNC in 2005. One of my dearest friends my dearest friends to date, Jim Graham, he was there from New Zealand. Many people. There was Peter Hind from the UK. And Peter Hind and I we just recently reconnected as well after all these years. I think it's been 17 years, Jeff, since that's what I figured out. So since the VNC, and I wanted a couple of copies of Peter Hind's book, Holding and Locating Points in Body Electronics. So I contacted him and he shipped me over a couple of his books. So that's in my inspiration to create some point holding groups and get some people really working with point holding again. So there was many people there. There were 12 body electronics instructors, and there was Doug Morrison, the author of How We Heal, and he was our instructor, our body electronics instructor. So so that's kind of the basis of who was there and when it was. And when, maybe Jeff, will you talk a little bit about the meters and maybe give a little bit of a description about what we do when we go to the VNC and we start working with the meters, which we don't do prior to that. So can you give the people just a bit of an understanding about that?
Sure. Most people are familiar with what's called the lie detector. It basically measures the galvanic skin response. In other words, if a person's lying, they will give off a signal. If they're telling the truth, it'll give off a signal based on the electrical charge going through their fingers. So this is what is used as in, I guess, police work to tell if a person's lying. So anyway, this ability to measure the galvanic skin response was used as a way to help people access the mental level. In other words, to where if you're having your points held or not, and you're verbalizing a word pattern, let's say you're on what Illia calls the cans, but it's just a couple of rods that hook you into a wire and into a meter that measures on a scale. And so when we would work together at the VNC, the day that Illia accessed the time-space continuum, I was the one watching the meter, and Illia was holding the cans, she calls them. And so the concept that John Ray taught as a principle is that until man can experience on the mental level that which exists on the physical, he will be bound to the physical. And so learning to access the mental level without exterior input of the point holding, which elicits our pain and starts us down the cascade of awakening the emotional body. This is a very advanced work where you learn just by intuitively feeling whether or not the word patterns that you're tapping into and the emotions and thoughts that are tied to that, whether you're accessing the mental level and doing yourself any good as far as raising your consciousness to be able to be more aware of yourself and your higher potential as a human being. So that's what I was doing when Illia accessed the time-space continuum. And I'll let Illia take it from there because it was her experience. And I was just sitting there helping guide her as she accessed what we lovingly call the time-space continuum.
Okay, so there's two things that I feel to share about that. So the first thing is I'll tell a little personal story. And there was the woman who, her and I, we had done, her name's Carolyn, and her and I had done many body electronic seminars together with Doug. And I would drive down from Canada and she would come up from Texas. She would drive up from Texas. And we were always, we were always kidding with each other about who had done more intensives with Doug. And I think we were really neck and neck all through the years. And we often had our motel rooms next to each other, and we grew to love each other. And, we were very, very close after, of course, you can imagine the number of years. And so her and Jim Graham were two people that I had discussed what I'm going to tell you in a minute. I discussed this with, and they had the same experience. So that morning, and if I remember correctly, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of I know it was on a Friday, and we did 6 days. We only had Sundays off at the VNC. It wasn't like a regular intensive where we had Saturdays and Sundays off. So I remember it being a Friday. It was 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. I recall that. And in the early morning hours of that morning, I had this in my motel room. I had this, you could say it was like a visitation. And whether it was an external visitation or whether it was me talking to me, that's irrelevant. It was really, the question was posed to me if I wanted to go through the time-space continuum work. And my immediate response to that was that if it was going to be of service, if it was really going to be of service to, to humanity or to myself and humanity as a whole, then I would be, I'd be willing to do that. So, and that was the morning that it actually, that I experienced it. And so going back to Jim and Carolyn, they both had that same experience that morning. So why it was that morning? Because we had been working, for 3 solid weeks. So why the timing was that morning, I don't know. but but both of them had told me that. Jim has passed on to the other worlds, and I lost contact with Carolyn quite a few years ago as well. So, but they were both asked, and Carolyn told me that she declined, and so did Jim. So for their own reasons. Actually, I'm not sure if Jim declined. I know Carolyn said that she declined, but then Jim, I think he just kind of said whatever, whatever. So so I had this and I want Jeff, I want you to kind of talk about that too. I had a really, because it's very serious work. We're there's disciplines where to prepare for this work, where we're standing still, completely still, staring forward without blinking our eyes. We started off with like a few hours, then the longest one was six hours that we would stand and discipline the body. So we're, just to give you some understanding of how we progress into the ability to really access the mental body. The physical body had to be very disciplined, especially with stillness and breath. So that day, though, was very different in the sense that there wasn't this seriousness or it was, and a lot of it was done in silence. We weren't, it wasn't like the emoting that we have when we're processing on the body electronics table. It's an internal process with the BNC. It becomes very internal. So, it's always quite very silent and very serious. But that day, I just had this sort of really felt like giggly and jovial and silly. I really had this feeling. I felt really silly, and I was like, saying like really silly things, and which was unusual for this work. So can you jump on that, Jeffory? Like how you experienced that? Because I think you had that same sort of energy.
Sure. Just a side note of reflection as I look back over what happened that day over the years is I've always wondered why it was that only Illia of all of us that were there actually experienced accessing the time-space continuum of all the people, and why I was the one selected by the source to be the one on the cans. And I think I'm hoping today to kind of share my journey and how it evolved from that event where I did not access, but I was a witness to Illia accessing the time-space continuum. But what I remember about the jovialness of that day was that Illia spoke some words like, it feels like I got a volcano in my belly, and it feels like it's gonna, what was the word you used, explode or burst or something like that? Blow. And quite jovially I said, well, you be sure to let me know when you're gonna blow. So it was a few seconds after that she blew, and I was sitting there watching the meter, and it went to zero, which is very significant. I'll let Illia take it from there.
Well, I'd like to say a little bit about like more of the physicality and the inner experience a little bit. So I felt this pressure in my solar plexus, and that was what I was describing as the volcano. And so it got to the place where I felt like there was no control, like there was literally no control, and that I had no control. And that was what I was internally processing. And so I was really feeling that immense feeling of no control. And with that, I was also looking at and feeling how perfectly okay I was with that. So the energy that came when I actually went to zero on the meter was the surrender, the full surrender that, and it wasn't like not like in on the body electronics table where, you know, if you're working with an energy, then you bring the, you know, the forgiveness in, or the energy of love, or the energy of gratitude. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like accessing those, what I call those the three powers. I don't know if you've looked at my writings, Jeff, recently, but I call those, I decided to call those the three powers. So it wasn't like that. It wasn't like I was accessing something to transmute something. It was very, very, very different than that. It was the full sense of no control and the full willingness to surrender to that feeling of not having any control. So that just that absolute, like it was like 100% willingness to surrender to no control. So that's what I was feeling internally. And when that surrender, it actually kind of like overtook me. It was just like this, you know, it was greater than me. It was greater than, again, like finding one of the three powers and applying it as we do to resistance. It wasn't like that. It was greater than me, and it just it came from within, but then it sort of just it wasn't just in my physical body, but I could feel it like through and around my physicality. And I remember I was just holding perfectly still and watching, because you yelled that something like, you can correct me if I'm off with the wording, but you yelled something like, she's gone to zero, or something like that. And Doug ran across the room, and I could see this all in my peripheral vision, yet I was in another sort of reality, but simultaneously very aware of the physical reality as well. And so you and Doug were watching the meter, which was across from me. So when we're working like on the meter, we sit facing each other, and with a table in between and the meter on the table. So you were a few feet away from me, facing me, and then Doug was standing behind you, and you were both focused on the meter. And I was just in this surrendered state. I mean, surrender doesn't really even give, it's not really, the word doesn't even give it justice, really. I mean, it was just this total surrendered state. And at that time, or no time, I had, even though I was very aware of this physical reality, I was also aware of other beings and another reality simultaneously. And there was like a telepathic communication with what I perceived as several beings. And then from there, I remember Doug coming around and touching my right hand to feel, because I started going into a endothermic and exothermic simultaneous reaction. And I remember him touching my hand, and him saying something like, oh, wow, like it's hot, like it's really hot. So I was exothermic to the touch, yet I was endothermic in the room. So do you recall that? Do you remember? I remember seeing people,
Yes.
and this went on for several minutes afterward. People were like I remember somebody putting their hood up on their hoodie, and then somebody saying something like, because it was really hot. Do you remember? I think it was in was it in June or July? But it was hot weather. It was really hot in that facility. And somebody said, "Oh wow, we got our own air conditioner," And so even though my body was going through an exothermic, and I think this is important, an exothermic reaction internally, and it was blowing off that endothermic cold. So, and it was really quite dramatic. I mean, I think you can tell me what you experienced with that, Jeff.
Sure. Personally, I didn't feel cold or hot. That's what I remember. But that being said, I was only 3 feet away from your solar plexus to my solar plexus.
Mm-hmm.
And our biofields were intertwined. So I guess on some level, when you understand the auric field and the interaction that always happens when we hold points on one another, where you can't tell where you begin and I end and you begin, there was something like that going on. But I don't remember experiencing hot or cold myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a profound day. So with that, Jeff, how did you experience it after? Like, I remember John, in John's writings, he said that it was a couple of years after he did after he went through the time-space continuum work. It was a couple of years of, and I believe John went through it 4 times, if I'm recalling correctly. And Doug went through it once on Maui. Was it on Maui that Doug went through the time-space continuum work? I believe so.
That was what I remember.
Mm-hmm.
I remember him. I asked him at a later follow-up to when I went to Maui for another body electronic seminar series. I asked him when we were in a vehicle, I think going down to Woodrose, what it was like for him as he went through the time-space continuum. So yes, he did experience that in Maui.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. And I know Doug said it too, that it took a couple of years before things sort of, the interchanges that affect the outer realm. So everything sort of externally, the universe kind of adjusts, as things change internally. And so how did you experience that after, Jeffory?
Well, I've been processing it for 15 years, 14 years. And I'll get into that, but it would take, I would like to state, I would like you to, I will talk about that because it's quite it's my story, right? Of, a lot of time a lot of water under the bridge. But I would like to state, just my feeling is right now is, please describe the entity that attempted to stop you in this process.
I don't feel there was an entity that attempted to stop me. What does that come from?
Well, you described to me earlier of this energy that came into the room. It went past Carol, and then it came into
that was a different time. That was when Carolyn was facilitating me. That was because I went through it 4 times during that course, and so it was with Carolyn that was that entity. Yeah. I can talk about that if you feel it. I feel like right now we should stay with what you and I experienced.
I was unaware that that was not part of the experience you and I were having. So
Oh,
thanks
yeah,
for
no, that was
clarifying
with,
that. Yeah, let's
that was
stay
with
focused
Carolyn.
on
Yeah.
what we experienced. Yeah.
So I want you to talk about how you experienced it and how you feel. Like, okay, I'll start by saying one thing, and then I want to hear about how you processed it, how you interpret it, and how that was for you. For me, I want to make it clear to people that are listening that zero ohms resistance and the time-space continuum work is actually an extremely advanced healing crisis. That's that is what it is. And it's actually going, because we experience healing crises on the physical level. We can kind of we can really cognize that. We can see how that is possible, because it comes out on the physical level, and we can actually see it and feel it, and so it makes it more real in some ways. At least with the senses, we can perceive it in a different way. So that is that type of healing crisis where we're going into a physical healing crisis, and we're experiencing pain, or something's happening, and then we move some energy and it regenerates, where we can feel that, we can see that. And then from there, the healing crisis that we experience when we're going through emotions, we can also that's very experiential in something that we're maybe more familiar with through the emotional body. But when it gets to the mental body, it gets into unfamiliar territory with this everyday human lifestyle that we've created on this planet. Entering the mental body becomes it's very unusual. It doesn't need to be, but it has taken on that. I see that there hasn't been. I haven't met very many people that have been really truly been able to access the mental body, and only because the amount of effort it takes to get from the physical to the mental. I mean, that's that's really in my observation. It's just because of that amount of willingness and perseverance and commitment. I mean, all of the things that are required to really get through so much on the physical, emotional levels, to actually even be able to get us to the place where we can access the mental body. So when you're accessing the mental body, as Jeffory said earlier, that's really what the VNC work is. Where what I experienced zero ohms resistance and the time-space continuum work, it was this bridge. And this is my part of it, and that's why I bring it up, so that people understand that it's a healing crisis. It's this bridge that requires like immense amount of willingness, that bridges the mental body to the spiritual body, and that's how I experienced it. So suddenly, that was accessed in a way that perhaps I hadn't been aware of prior. At least in my, maybe there were other times in my youth, but we're not going to go into that right now. There was more spontaneous. What I saw is like time-space continuum work, but it was more spontaneous as a child. But that's another story. So yeah. So I just wanted to make that point, that it is actually a healing crisis. It's a tremendous healing crisis, but it is a healing crisis.
Wonderful, very well expressed, Illia. Thank you. And I'm sure that the listeners are going to really glean a lot from your dedication over the years and your willingness to continue John's work, body electronics, without a real support system, other than your own source, your own higher self, the one that spoke through you on that day back in 2005. So thank you for that. So
Gotta keep on keeping on.
as far as how I processed the experience and the years that followed, it's been an ongoing journey, and I felt to stay silent about it because the deeper I went, the weirder it got in terms of the official narrative that most of us are exposed to. So this is, I I have a friend who's a massage therapist, and I will always share with them what I'm going through, you know, as I'm helping them remodel this old farmhouse not far from where I live here. And one day it came to me, it was like, there's a book called The Road Less Traveled. And so I said to her, well, I should write a book called The Road Less Traveled Than the Road Less Traveled. So just to give you an idea that if you choose to go down this rabbit hole, if you want to call it that, this vortex known as the time-space continuum, it'll be like Alice in Wonderland. You know, you're going to wonder if you're losing your mind or not, or if you're literally as insane as everybody's telling you you are. The things that are coming up and out of your being. But that being said, I'm being very evasive about what did come up out of my being as like the conclusion to my journey, which is, I think I think I'm at a point where I'm ready to go public, and Illia has graciously offered this platform. So I'll just say that if anybody listening wants to tap into my work, what I call my work, my passion, my mission, I have attempted over the years since Illia and I experienced this to write. I'm a very good writer, and I've published an ebook. Which is like, was a blog to begin with, because I got so tired of trying to tell people what I was experiencing and getting that look in their eye of, what the F are you talking about? You know, just complete cognitive dissonance. So my inner soul has said, well, okay, I don't want to create stress or trauma for anybody else. As a physician, what's our motto? First, do no harm. So I call myself a peaceful warrior. I even wore one of my duck feathers to commemorate, you know, that feeling I have of being a peaceful warrior. And I know there's many of us working towards the same heaven on earth goal, or whatever you want to call it, just peace on earth. So anyway, I was born and raised a Mormon, served a mission in Taiwan, took on all of the Oriental concepts, was far more influenced by the consciousness of the Chinese than I ever influenced them about the concepts of Mormonism. And so currently, my living situation is I live with a Chinese woman who is maybe a reflection of, you know, that past life when I was a Chinaman or whatever. But anyway, I've been through 4 marriages and 4 divorces since I was with Illia. And well, actually, since I got divorced in 1991, the first time. And it was after 10 years that I married my second wife. And that's who I live with now, but we got divorced after a year. And then I went through 2 other marriages and 2 other divorces before I remembered what my ebook is primarily dedicated to, that of losing a twin sister at the beginning of my 4th month in utero. And so my journey since the time-space continuum has basically opened my awareness to the time-space continuum is essentially what's time. Time is essentially what we've all forgotten collectively, and so we call it the unconsciousness. So body electronics is into the principle of raising consciousness to the point that we remember our divinity, I suppose. So anyway, after accessing the memory of losing my twin sister in utero, I realized that that experience, which by the way, 1 in 8 pregnancy starts as a twin and is much more common than we realize. I realized that these deep unconscious memories of the womb, this is my interpretation of the time-space continuum. That's what we're trying to access in raising and healing our physical, emotional, spiritual, mental bodies. What, however many bodies you believe we have, and how many dimensions you believe we have. There are different narratives about that. But the simplicity that we would rather die than remember what we experienced in the womb is what I've come to perceive as why death continues to rule and reign on the earth. And so being raised a Mormon, of course, was exposed to the concept of original sin, being this apple or this fruit, delicious to the taste and very desirable. But in looking at that word, it's like, well, okay, we get the death sentence from our Creator for doing something, and He doesn't tell us in the scriptures anyway specifically what that is, or if He would, then we'd stop doing it and we could stop this death-oriented society and turn it into a living-oriented society. So as I started to remember the experience of the womb, one of the main tenets that came out was that during this gestational period, every time my parents had sexual intercourse, it was like a waterboarding experience, which is commonly used as a form of torture. And I know all of you heard about waterboarding, but that's essentially what my opinion, what we all experience during the contraction of the uterus during gestation. And parents, the timing of parents engaging in this activity varies. And so all these different generations of gestation in utero are going to be challenged, survival of the fittest. The fetus learns that the only way they can survive is to surrender complete control to the parents, like you were talking about, that feeling of completely surrendering control. And one thing I found really interesting as I reconnected with Illia is that she described her gestation as being adopted, and also that her parents weren't together during her gestation, so she did not experience sex during pregnancy. So I want to turn it back over to you and just get you to kind of confirm that for the audience. Would you do that, Illia?
Well, that's an assumption on my part, because when we discussed it before, it's an assumption on my part in the fact that my mother and my birth mother and my birth father I knew weren't together. After my mother became pregnant with me, then they weren't together anymore. My birth father, it was just this really interesting thing that happened where after my mother and father had been together for 2 years, my birth father met someone and married her within 6 weeks, right as soon as my mother became pregnant with me. So, and then my mother moved from that city to another city to be with her sister. And then she gave birth to me in that city, and I was adopted out of that city. So I'm assuming my mother, her name was Faye, and she's no longer living. So I can't confirm it. So I'm just assuming that there wasn't sexual activity during my gestation. So,
yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. So the reason I felt to ask her to kind of throw that into the mix of my conversation is because my experience in trying to share my perception with my circle of influence that sex during pregnancy was harmful to the fetus didn't set well at all with and I've been rejected and ridiculed and called crazy for I guess the first time I accessed it was before the body electronics instructor seminar, because I was talking about it when I was there with Illia. We had a skit where we did a talent contest, and I did a little skit about the chicken embryo, and I have a YouTube video that was the only thing I'd been able to come up with to show the fetal in uterine breathing mechanism via a chicken.
the talent, no talent.
It'll be in the link. Huh?
Talent, no talent show.
What was that?
It was the talent, no talent show.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So we had some fun. It wasn't all serious gloom and doom, whatever. So you really get close and go deeper with people that are willing to look within versus blaming outside themselves, which has been my continual path, I suppose, since those days when Illia accessed the time-space continuum. So since then, my soul has remembered is that the original meaning of adultery is to not only be faithful to your wife, but don't lay with her during gestation. Don't trouble her. Create a very peaceful space for the fetus to develop. And the Creator gave us free will. And humans are the only ones with free will. And then the rest of the creations were created, all the other mammals that have a placental attachment, except for one bobonus monkey, don't engage in sex during gestation. And in fact, they're vehemently programmed against it. And they have no shame about their bodily functions like urinating and pooping, like humans. So humans are the only ones that can have this shame. And I think the shame goes real deep into prenatal memory when the confused fetus was having to give its control away to these two beings, their mom and their dad. Wow. In order to survive into embodiment, it was the only way in, and we all knew this coming in, that we were coming into a world programmed to die before you even were born because of the violation of this one law of the Creator to not engage in sex during gestation. Wow.
So looking at that in terms of, okay, so that I understand about, so with this life and, with your life. So how does that tie in, do you feel, like in your research, in your inner research, how does that tie in with multiple lives? Is it like an accumulative effect? Because we're looking, what I hear you saying is that we're sort of recreating the death crystal when we come into physicality. We're recreating that death crystal that we kind of carry around with us as we continue to incarnate. So so is that accumulative? I guess that's my question, is would that be an accumulative effect?
Well, that's a really great question. I've been asked that before. And so my answer to that has been that most of the astrological beliefs around reincarnation, the narratives do not include gestation. It generally just includes the astrology present at the time the cord is cut, when our breathing mechanism changes from the inner world reality to the outer world reality. And if you consider all of the traumatic events that occur after a newborn comes into the world, not to mention the environmental epigenetic environment of the womb, which also has an effect, it's plain to see that the death-oriented crystal is alive and well, and it's trying to preserve its own life. It's like, but it's not the highest potential for us. So my journey has been finding a way to access this prenatal memory through many different modalities, including the principles of body electronics. So where that evolved from, rebirthing with a snorkel and a nose plug that Leonard Orr has taught to millions around the world, and very loved and been very helpful in people addressing birth traumas. I looked at that after doing rebirthing for 5 years. And I asked the question in 1994, well, what's the story behind the nasal pain we all experience when we get water up our nose? And John Ray taught that pain is the capstone of memory. So basically, I took the principle from body electronics that pain is the capstone of memory and looked at what the benefits of rebirthing were for people. And I asked the question, well, what's the nose plug about? If we're really going to dive into rebirthing on every level, not just the pleasure, which people would experience with the nose plug on, but also throwing the pain or the story behind the nasal pain. So in 1994, that was the first time I got the idea, when I was working at a horse farm in Versailles, Missouri, to curl up in the bathtub like I'd been doing to do rebirthing and to kind of reset the vagus nerve and, you know, sleep peacefully. I decided to take the nose plug off and gently draw the water at that time across my nasal membrane, and stay still in the fetal position and love the pain.
What year
when
was
I did
that?
this in 1994,
Okay.
this was 1994, before the 2005. So that's why when I came to the VNC with you, it's like I was talking, this was bubbling out of me then, but even there, Doug was not ready to hear what I was saying, and that's okay. I mean, I love him. I love him. I love you. I love everybody. But so my belly button started to pulse, and in 1994, I basically applied the stillness concept in the fetal position, curled up in a tub full of warm water, and took the nose plug off I'm completely immersed in this warm, womb-like environment. That's what was my idea, okay? And then I just, one nostril at a time, filled up the nasal cavity and swallowed, did the other side and swallowed. And the burning sensation that followed activated my navel pulsing.
Hmm.
And so every time I've done that since then, my navel has pulsed. And I recognize this pulsing, Illia, that's the same pulsing I experienced under my fingers when I'd hold points for hours and hours in the body electronic seminars.
Hmm.
So it was at that point I knew I wasn't on some kind of an intellectual head trip, because this belly button pulsing was similar to what you experienced that morning, where you said you had to completely let go of control, and it rose up through your, I guess, from your solar plexus. So I think there's a correlation there with my journey, the time-space continuum, but it's like I've been able to put words to it rather than just like, people can't grasp the time-space continuum concept, but there's been so much research done now on the fetal environment. And I saw you have listed on your website a new movie that just came out called In Utero. And I was in fact just watching that. I found the full, not just the trailer, but the full thing online, and was watching that just before our conversation began. And anybody that wants to look at that, there's a lot of interest in this prenatal environment going on, this is an excellent place to start, is just watch the movie In Utero on YouTube. Yeah.
Great.
And of course, I'm going to share all my links and all my writings of what came out of me since 2005 with Illia, but my journey into prenatal memory started before I even got there. But it wasn't until probably around, it was actually, I think it would have been after we were together, Illia, that the memories of the pain-pleasure complex started to come out of me. Now, pain is very high on the scale of emotions, as is pleasure. That would be enthusiasm. So basically, the effect of maternal orgasm is it simultaneously imposes all the good feelings the parents are having and that their ancestors had back generations of time, simultaneously time-stamped. Again, we have these timestamps on all of our electronic technology right now, but it's time-stamped into our flesh, into our being, into our whole soul. And so this, I think, is what's just actually awakening at this point. And to make this really hit home, I want to point out the current COVID chaos as a prenatal memory awakening from within us all. And just to let you feel the reality of why we trust the syringe, which is the method of inoculation for quite a long time, regardless of whether, but why do people have to go get the vaccines? Then they'll feel like everything's going to go back to normal. It's based on this trust we had of our umbilical cord, which was like a syringe, and it had blood flowing in both directions, and it was communicating with the mom and bypassing the skin protective layer and going directly into the bloodstream of the fetus, as well as out of the bloodstream of the fetus. So this pandemic, this lockdown, and all the anger and all the truckers up in Canada and in America and this trucker convoy. I actually was a trucker for 5 years, and I saw the transportation industry through these eyes of body electronics. And I saw that the payload that these truckers and the materialism is all based on our first thing that we built in the womb, our cord and placenta, the placenta being like the time clock on the wall. This is where the time, we have so much energy invested in building our body, and it was the placenta that was our first clock, our dinner plate, where we were nourished from, that we had to create something to put this energy into unconsciously, and that's why we let this time clock on the wall run our life. And it's generally been round, although we have all the digital stuff that squares it up now. So I've written extensively about this and been in the silence, because it's like I said earlier, the only look I get from people when I try to tell them what's taken me years of layer by layer unraveling gestation for me. And I assume that since there's only one of us in the creator's eyes, that as I do that, and I transmute and love these emotions, that goes out plain wide simultaneously. And that's my intent, is to stay silent and just do my work and not need an audience, not need money for it, because I am so blessed where I live. I just will say, I live on beautiful 30 acres, and to pass this COVID 2-year things, I've been raising ducks and geese, and they're like my little flock of followers. And I came to find that these sentient beings with their feathers, now this is one of the feathers here, have taught me so much about prenatal memory, and you would never think of it, but that's how I've dealt with this COVID pandemic, is having something to care for in the form of ducks and geese. I've tried to get people to come and help me build a healing center, but it's felt like the purpose of me being here is not to get anybody else to do what I'm doing. All I got to do is do it myself, and then it's a glad free gift to everybody. The twinkle twinkle. I don't know if I'm completely crazy, but I hope so.
I have a couple things to say there. So when you said the pain, the pain is in body electronics, we have, to anybody that's completely new to the work, we have 49 levels that we, as a construct. I mean, all constructs are just meant for the intellect to be able to navigate. That's all these constructs are all about. And so the 49 levels of emotion that we use as a construct in body electronics, the level of pain resonates with the pituitary. So you said that you're speaking about the level of pain, but then you said the level of pleasure would be more enthusiasm. I feel like when you get to the level of pain, that's where the duality comes with the pain pleasure response within that level. And not necessarily in the level of enthusiasm, but in that level of pain, that's actually where we find also the other side of the duality, which would be pleasure, and how we bring that duality together. We bring the duality together by removing the resistance and the attachment that we have to one side of a duality and the other, so that we eventually bring those, we bring that duality together as one. And another thing I have a question for you. So you want a healing, you have a desire to create a healing center there. And so the question came to me because when did you first take the instructor seminar? Was that with Doug?
That was the first time I was certified as an instructor, is at the VNC. I took many courses with John Ray, but being a chiropractor and having a busy practice, I was unable to always stay for the full course to be certified.
So, but you had cranials though prior to the VNC.
Yeah, several. I'd been back and forth to Maui 4 times before
no
he moved to the Cook Islands.
No cranials in the time of Doug, like no cranials in the time Doug was teaching in Pennsylvania?
I had one there.
Okay.
I went to one of Doug's, yes, okay, I remember now. I did go to one of Doug's seminars prior to him offering the higher level of a VNC. Yes.
Because he did too. I
So
took both
that
of
would be like,
his instructor seminars were 2003 and 2004. So, so my question is with the healing center that you desire to create, is that for body electronics instruction? Is that how you feel to present it to the world?
it can be.
Hmm.
It would be an awesome format, and I'd welcome working with you on that at whatever level we're capable of during this lockdown. But, you know, who knows? That may be lifted because you and I are talking right now, because we're that powerful. But I'm not holding my breath.
One of the
I
things
did that long enough in the womb.
one of the things that I'm doing for people that have been like, that know the points, they don't have to be an instructor, but they either have to have studied with me to the point, studied body electronics to the point, and had enough experience, because this is an experiential thing. I want people to really understand that. You know, Jeffory is describing his experience, I'm describing my experience, but within the body electronics unraveling with the body electronics work, we each have our own individual experience. We have, and they're often extremely, well, they're always unique. So they're always different. We have this format, this construct that we all, you know, navigate through to get to those, go through those levels, you know, via the healing crises. Yet each one of our experiences of that are completely unique. I think that's important to say. And also, so what I'm doing for people who have either enough experience that they know how to instruct the points and they know how to be what we call a floater. So somebody has to be not plugged into the points, to the acupressure points during an intensive. So somebody's kind of overseeing and they're watching, and if they're needed at a table, there's somebody to do that. So I've been facilitating, I've been lecturing remotely for people that are doing that in their point holding groups. And I welcome that anywhere. At the moment, I can't leave the country. I can't even fly domestically. So, so I've been doing that. There's a person in New Zealand who is looking to gather a group. You know, John spent so many years in New Zealand. I'm sure there's still people there, you know, with body electronics experience. So I'm hoping that that can really flourish again in New Zealand. And this, we are in a time, I'm sure, you know, people will know this, that this is crucial. Whatever, you know, a time, no time, you know, I mean, we're in this bubble, but this is a crucial time for change, so that humanity can truly, what you said earlier, Jeffory, about you know, if we can move our consciousness, like really, and by that I mean release resistance that we have to life and to death. You know, love that death crystal until it's you know, doesn't have the hold on us anymore in a, you know, a molecular way. And you know, really just get together and really do the work so that we can really move that consciousness. I've just recently put the call out to that 1% that John Ray would say that body electronics is meant for, the 1% of the population of humanity. And so I put that call out to that 1% recently, and that's several. I think I actually tried to figure it out, and I don't know the exact number, but it's like, it's 700 and some odd million worldwide. So that's a lot of body electronics intensive. That's a lot of, you know, that's a lot of gatherings. That's a lot of, it's a lot of work being done on the planet. And I feel like like we really have to move forth with this and just really give it our all, you know, as instructors and as you know, the people that have been given this work. I mean, we've been given the work, and I feel really intent on putting it out to the sincere and willing participants. So that's my feeling about it. Yeah. So I'm happy if you have a gathering there, if you bring a gathering of people there, and if my website will help them, you know, you can direct them to my website, and that could, you know, help them get sort of a basic understanding. You're welcome to use anything on my website too, by the way. I've uploaded John's 3 books there. You can print them off. You can do it. You know, you can download them and use them how you choose. My books are there free of charge. You can download those and use those. I've put on the BE guide that has everything, you know, all the basics, the flow sheet, the everything that people require. So yeah, so I'm here to be of service. If you gather people together, I'm happy to do it. It's what I've been doing for other groups is I do like a morning lecture to start the day, kind of in the format of Doug Morrison. I do a midday after people have had their lunch, and end of the day Q&A. That seems to be how it works the best.
Yeah, this lockdown has caused many of us to literally go within not only our own hearts, but our own homes. And I feel it's just a mirror of how we felt in the womb. And somehow that's what I've been influential in by just doing my work in the silence. I remember the Ascended Master teachings of to know, to dare, to do, and to be silent. And that's been a really strong principle that I've lived by in doing this inner work. But I'm so thankful to have you, Illia. I can't tell you, I've been alone for too long. I don't know how the doors are going to open to where we can all collectively move through this lockdown into an order out of the chaos. But I feel that's what we need to give our hope and our intention to, wherever we're coming from. As far as doing remote healing sessions with you, I would welcome that here. The issue I have is that, number one, I've been trying to get people to come here for 10 years, and it doesn't seem to be in the cards with my path. Maybe that will change.
Keep going.
Because
Keep
I'm
going.
more.
See, the piece that I feel that, like, you know, you say, okay, we've all kind of gone cocooning, but yet there's the majority of people don't have they actually literally don't have the knowledge to know how to transmute. So they go into a holding pattern, and that holding pattern, you know, what we hear, like people have gained a lot of weight because they want to just feed themselves carbs to have that sort of suppressive response, or alcohol or drug use, or any, you know, Netflix, pornography. I mean, however people sort of offset their discomfort in our current consciousness of the masses. And I mean, those are just a few.
Yeah, I would like
but I'm sure there's many more. Instead of actually having that time or that even that ability to be able to move through all the resistances that have been, you know, for me, the last 2 years have been like a plethora of opportunities to move energy and to, you know, transmute things that have come up. So so that really even inspires me more to really reach out and and even making these videos and creating. I have a couple of people don't really appreciate Facebook, and I totally get that, in the sense that we know it's we know where it comes from, yet it also is like a platform that I'm using right now for a couple of groups, like the Body Electronics group, Evolution of Consciousness, and the Gnostic Way group. So I have those two groups. I'm putting up pretty much daily, either daily inspirations or writings, video content. Sometimes I do like lives there. So it just gives people like an easily accessible, to just get that sort of inspiration to keep going and move in the right direction. So until we can get back in person, I'm attempting to, I'm new to this area in Nelson, British Columbia, where I'm living at the moment. And when you come into a new environment and I know, I came here only knowing my daughter and her partner, and in this area, and people don't know me. So, to kind of step into a new environment is interesting. So I've been pretty active, doing things and meeting people. We're going to have a big solstice event this Sunday, and I'm going to be part of that. So I'm pretty active. I'm going to do another Body Electronics intro in April here. I have a little office downtown on Baker Street. So yeah, I'm just going to keep going and do my very best to keep things going forward and reach as many people as possible.
Yes, and I feel like well, I'll just tell you, I've already shared your websites with my circle of influence, which at the current time is like not that small, a lot of very advanced consciousness people. So I'm excited to share this interview with them because I have posted your website into the conversations and the dialogues that I've been having in two basic arenas, and I'll share those with the listeners because some of the listeners may already have been exposed to these levels of consciousness. One of them is Shivambu, which is the practice of urine therapy as your own best medicine, which is in harmony with the womb because we were bathing in our own urine for our gestation of 9 months. So that is the medium or the environment that we created our body in. And I'm finding that a lot of the people in the urine therapy community are really excited about one of the videos I put out doing a aged urine full body dip tank soak, where I'm completely immersed in warm amniotic fluid, just like the womb. And I'll tell you, it's like urine therapy on steroids. So I've shared with that group, and I'm going to share this video with them. And they're in need of the understanding of the principles. They can take pee and rub it on their body and drink it, whatever, but they don't understand the laws of love, light, and perfection. So I think that's where what you're doing and me just kind of plugging in and leaving you as the source of the intellectual information is more in harmony with where I'm coming from. Mm-hmm. And the other group is the people that are known as People Unlimited, which is the immortals out of Scottsdale, Arizona, who have been promoting the concept of physical immortality. I first met them in 1989 as a chiropractor. Before this, the ladder got pulled from underneath me, and I was put out in the wilderness like Moses, saying, "Oh, let's see if we can mold this guy into something useful." Not saying chiropractors aren't useful. I'm just saying that John Ray had the experience of taking, stacks of before and after spinal point holding sessions of people who had straightened their scoliotic spines down at the chiropractic college in Texas, and they wouldn't receive it. So as a chiropractor, that really impressed me. I was trained to, get the spine straight. And when you have a modality that within just a few hours of doing a spinal, people can literally let go of the whatever it is, the suppression of their life force that caused this to happen, and they can have a normal spine. And then you get into cranial work, and people, the misalignment of all the cranial bones. I was an avid practitioner of what the chiropractors listening might remember as Dr. Ferrari's work called neural organization technique, NOT. And I helped a lot of people, a lot of young children with attention deficit disorder and dyslexia and all the learning challenges by just simply getting the cranial bones to expand and contract with each breath. And more chiropractors will be familiar with sacro-occipital technique, SOT. But there are so many narratives, but I think this narrative of body electronics tops anything I've heard of or seen at the physical manifestation level. And so with that background, I used all of my understanding of the physical body when I left chiropractic and applied the principles of body electronics. And the path has led me back to the womb. That's my passion. I have nowhere to run to, nowhere to hide. Yeah, it's like our lives right now. We can't escape who we are as divine beings that have been locked in this death crystal. So my big vision is to end death, dying, suffering, on the earth, which part of my journey has been realizing that we've been lied to about the shape of the earth, that we actually live on a flat, immobile, stationary plane. And the reason that we've invested so much energy into the concept of living on a ball is because we started living inside of a ball. So these unconscious memories of the time-space continuum being trapped within the death crystal is why there's so much money being donated to NASA and all the outer space exploration, is because we internally, we want to remember our wholeness when we were hooked up to our other half, the cord and placenta, inside this ball. And every effort is made by the death crystal to keep us from accessing our wholeness. And I think this is the only place where we're going to find oneness. But I don't want to forget to mention the name of the people in Scottsdale. They're currently called People Unlimited. And I actually started a chiropractic clinic with 13 of the people that came from, they were black sheep from all over the world, and started a clinic called Bioforce in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I thought, well, I've got my ticket to all the money I'll ever need. But the chiropractic board shut me down because we were advertising facelifts with microcurrent therapy under a chiropractic license, because none of the people coming to this call of immortality had any licensure. I just happened to meet Chuck, Bernie, and Jim in Scottsdale, Arizona, when I was still licensed and had a place where people could come. And I treated a lot of people in that group, but I kept seeing them die. And I wasn't happy about that. I said, okay, we have a great idea, but let's make it real. So I'm hopeful, Illia, that the people that I've met who know that I was the first professional to actually go all in with my license, my money, my intent to create a clinic based in physical immortality. And now the grandbaby of that consciousness intent is what is called RAAD-Fest, R-A-A-D Fest. And it stands for Revolution Against Aging and Death. And if you Google that, you're going to find that there are billions of dollars being invested by people who still believe that money's going to buy their immortality. But it all comes back to the AI, artificial intelligence, versus real intelligence. Now, the AI is a reflection of the real intelligence within our own being. And these devices we hold in our hands is merely a reflection of our first motherboard, the placenta. When you realize the comedy that's going on with all this trust and belief in AI merely being a reflection of our unconscious memories from the womb, it gets quite comical and funny. And we can laugh at ourselves and say, oh, I knew that, I just forgot. And we can go from there as a united union. That's what yoga means, is union of the heart, mind, and soul. And I've done yoga. I've done so many, self-healing modalities, and they're all great. But I think the core understanding of the time-space continuum, how to access it, is going to have a lot of tentacles of modalities that we can use. And this is what my journey has been, is I haven't had anybody to hold my points. And rather than, feel sorry for myself, I went looking for ways to continue this evolving of my inner consciousness. And I have a lot of people in my circle of influence that are waiting to see this video, that it will just be like primed. They're ready for it, because I've been laying these seeds for a long time.
Well, it's
Thanks
all about consciousness. It's all about consciousness. Everything is all about consciousness. And that's the bottom line with everything, whether we're, the consciousness is being laid on a flat or a round earth. To me, that it's the consciousness with which we are with projecting. So that's the work. That's the inner work. We clean it up. We clean up the resistance. We clean up the attachment, and we live, and we do the best we can as human beings, as we're progressing, through those stages of physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Yeah. Shall we complete it there?
Very well said. I like that. Yeah. I had a thought just run through me about the current battle between the consciousness of people over whether the earth is flat or it's a ball. And it's quite a dynamic exchange taking place. And once I perceived it is flat, and I went to the Flat Earth conference and I met all these leaders in the Flat Earth community, and I tried to share with them the concept that the reason it's so easy to fool people into believing they live on a ball is because we started living inside of a ball. They're not ready for it. They're only ready to look at the physical, what we can see, but there's so much more to our being, emotional body, than just the visual input. But that's where they're at. And I have
the inner journey
been able to bridge that gap, but I'm hopeful that the bridge is body electronics. That's where I'm tossing my hat into the fire.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jeffory. Thank you. Oh, I love a duck feather. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah. So I live in Missouri.
Missouri
is called the show me state. Show me in black and white. So my ducks show me that we all have feathers. We all have wings. We got them tucked. We need to, take back our angelic potentials.
That's a great feather too, to represent the electromagnetic spectrum and the dualistic format that we're working with. Bringing those
I've learned
things into oneness.
I've learned so much from from birds, you know. The other night I was out at dusk and one of those kingfishers swooped down in right at dusk and landed on the mother boat that all my ducks sleep on at night. I was like, wow. It was like a sign, you know.
That's really beautiful.
It was fun.
Thank you so much, Jeffory. Thank you. Let's continue the conversation. We'll keep, we'll get re-inspired and we'll into another topic. I'm always asking the people that are looking at my work to just, tell me what you want to learn about, within the body electronics format, and then we can have another discussion around it.
I would love that, Illia. I'm so thankful for you. Yeah. And I'm thankful for me. I've been a stranger in a strange land. I live in the heartland of America and I live in redneck heaven. So believe me when I say none of my neighbors get me. But my ducks do.
Well, thank you so much. Okay, we'll be in touch.
Okay. Love you, Illia.
Love you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.